Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rallyday Partners, and this is the Founders Journey podcast. We'll explore the heart and soul of great founders and their journey to build the company of their dreams. You will learn about new industries and business models while discovering how to apply the founder's mindset to your everyday work and life. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Founders Journey podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Heckman, and I'm here today with a dear friend, I would say role model and inspiration, Vance Brown. Vance personifies one of Rallyday's core principles of living a full life, which is to focus on significance and not just success. He's done that consistently throughout his career as an entrepreneur and as a civic leader, and I'm certain as a husband and father. And I'm excited to be welcoming Vance. This is going to be probably a little deeper episode today. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Vance, what I'll say about him, and I thought about this my walk to the office today. Colorado is known for a number of things, skiing being one of them, our mountains certainly as part of that. And as I think about Vance, who lives in Colorado Springs, one of the symbols of Colorado is Pikes Peak. It's largely because of its size. It's about 14,100 feet, give or take, and it sits over Colorado Springs. But you can see it from all the way from Fort Collins all the way down to Pueblo, and it's this dominating, inspirational monument to all that is good about Colorado. In fact, fact check me here, Vance, but I think that is where Catherine Lee Bates wrote America the Beautiful back in, I don't know, probably late 1800s. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And when I think about Vance Brown and what he means to the state of Colorado, in many ways, he's going to hate this, but he has been a business leader and civic leader that has become significant like Pikes Peak. And he very, very well may be the best thing about Colorado Springs. And so with that, I welcome Vance Brown. Thank you for being here.
Well, Ryan, you're way too kind. That's that. I don't think I've had an introduction ever quite like comparing to me to Pikes Peak and its significance, but you're kind. Thank you. And I look forward to this conversation and thank you for inviting me.
Vance, I would like to start with kind of your story and maybe give me permission to interrupt if I find a place where kind of double clicking on your background might be helpful to our audience. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how you were raised and some of the big milestones in your life, whatever they may be, including obviously your dreams and ultimate reality of building a significant business in the IT space.
Okay, well, please interrupt because that's a big question, and I sometimes can just get going, and I'm trying to think of, as far as big milestones. But I grew up in North Carolina, born in Winston-Salem, and grew up in Durham, North Carolina.
Is that where you got this accent?
No, I got it from Southern Colorado. Well, just kidding. I tell people, they ask, where are you from? I say Southern Colorado because they hear the accent and they pause for a moment until they get the joke. But yes, I don't hear the accent, but I'm sure as I listen back to this podcast, that's when I hear it and I go, oh my gosh, I really sound like that. But I hope it's okay. I've been here for 30 years and it's still there. But yes, grew up in North Carolina. I was raised in Durham, North Carolina. Yes, the home of the Duke Blue Devils there that recently lost in the Final Four. That's a whole story. If you're from North Carolina, you get the whole Carolina Duke thing. By the way, if you watch White Lotus, there's a whole theme in there about Carolina and Duke. I won't get into that, but that's its latest episode. So it's a big deal. I grew up in a very modest, maybe even lower middle class home in Durham. A 1,100 square foot home, 2 brothers, 2 parents. And from my vantage point, it was fine. We didn't have a lot of money, but I don't feel like I really missed out. I didn't know I was lacking for anything because I had a roof over my head and we had food, but the old cars and things that, I always saw, you compare as a kid, like, gosh, I wish we had a newer car like that or lived in a house like that, et cetera. So I remember some of that growing up, and I always remember, trying to do well in school and otherwise. And first big milestone I remember, Ryan, was in 6th grade. And, I never had a great self-esteem. In fact, I'm not overweight, but as a kid I was, and my nickname was Piglet in the neighborhood. So yeah, that's tough. So I don't think I had a great self-esteem, but in 6th grade, I got this award, a scholarship medal, and, for the 6th grade. And it was like, oh my gosh, first time I ever got recognition of like something significant, right? And I remember getting it, and I remember bringing it home and showing my parents, and the delight in their eyes, and how big a deal it was to them to see that, gosh, I did something special. And that impacted me. I realized, wow, like what the reaction I get in my own heart and from others, and my parents especially, of when I get some kind of award. It turned out that I was kind of driven that way. That was just the first time I think I recognized it. So that was the first big moment where I went, oh, significance and success, or having success and receiving accolades mattered at that point in my life. And I was going to go after them. And I was pretty competitive.
And then what?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not pausing just in case. No. So then in high school, I go to high school and, started doing well and in sports, and captain the football team, and did well. The president of the honor society, and most likely to succeed. Those kinds of things, and I was driven to continue that. So that drive.
And so in that respect, there's always this chicken or egg that we debate here at our firm around the word confidence, and whether we find success and therefore get confidence, or whether it's more likely that you have confidence and so therefore you get success. And there's some funny relationship between these two things. And I think we're on the side of confidence can come from a variety of places, but you're never going to get success without it. How would you unpack that debate, given you had this catalytic moment when you were in the 6th grade, which led to all your harder work in high school that you may not have had the drive to do so discomfortably, if not for maybe a commitment to just being successful as a human? And like, how did that work for you?
I mean, it's a great question of, obviously you have to have some kind of moment that something you do is recognized. And in certain personalities, and if you've ever heard of the Enneagram, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, okay, which is all about accomplishment. And again, a lot of this feels very prideful to even share some of this story. So I hope obviously we'll get to pick up on why I thought that all had to be torn down in my life, and some of the ego that comes with that was not healthy at all. Okay. So let's just state that for the record. But at that season of life, I think it's quite healthy for a kid to get confident, have confidence in something, and to receive some kind of accolades for doing something. And then that has a kind of a spiral up, or you can have some negative things happen that you spiral down. So I think there is some momentum. So I think that confidence you're talking about matters. And I think it's helpful to have, mentors and parents who are encouraging. Now that can get to be, in the continuum way too much, where it's all about what you do and not who you are. So that's how all that can get messed up. But yes, I think kids need to find something that gives them confidence that they can build upon to say, you know what, I'm special there. I can do something with that, and I'm going to double down and improve it. And by the way, the world we live in, especially in America, right? It's about that. We have to become good at something, get paid for it, have a living, etc.
So you went from high school, and then you went to Wake Forest, right, for undergrad?
I did. I went to Wake Forest, and once again, at that point in life, you get out of sports, and there's like one thing I'm working on, and that's school. And it was doing well there, and with the idea of like, what am I going to do with it? I mean, there's some stories there that were very. I don't know how much to go into it, but I had a big moment there, and that was I have an older brother, incredibly bright when it comes to technology. So, he was very influential in my life because he was an older brother, like 6 years older, but he would hang out with me and do things and teach me things. Like, I remember he would teach me like pi. It's not just 3.14, but it's 3.141592653589793238. I don't know why we learn this stuff like chess and those kinds of things that don't matter like that far in pi, but he also taught me early on. We're talking about in the that late 70s how to program in like BASIC because he was, programmed through his high school and taught me some of that. So for graduation, I got this little calculator that you could actually program in BASIC. And I remember going to an econ class. It's a 101, big class, 100 people kind of thing. And they were teaching about elasticity of demand and the formula, old price, new price, that kind of thing. And I remember while I'm in class programming it into my calculator, it had a little prompt screen of enter the old price and the new price, the new quantity, old quantity, all that. And as he was teaching the formula, I was programming it. So after class, I went up to him and I showed the professor, like, hey, here it prompts you and it tells you if it's elastic or inelastic, and therefore do you increase price, decrease price. And you'd have thought I had shown him the first, landing on the moon. He had never, here he is, the chairman of the econ department, and saw this technology. He'd never seen anything quite like that because, this was back in 1981, right? But to me, it was like, not that big of a deal. To him, it was a huge deal. But that was one of those moments I went, I don't know what this technology thing is, but I know this, it matters. Okay. And then, I later got him to be my advisor. I majored in econ, minored in computer science, probably because of that one moment. And I minored only because there wasn't a major at the time at Wake Forest, right? Took everything you could get. And so that was a big moment that technology is going to matter in this world to me. And I needed to double down there. It's an opening, and I know something about it. And so then I was like, but I don't want to be a programmer. I kind of enjoyed programming, but not the idea that I was going to be in a room all day programming. And so then I decided to go to law school and really focus on intellectual property law and how to protect this new intellectual property called computer software. Because it was the early day, kind of like AI today in terms of the legal implications. Back then it was that.
I was laughing to myself when you were talking about your calculator story, and that the headline might have been that the calculator was going to put all the mathematicians out of work.
Right.
Much like AI, is going to take.
Oh, do you remember? I was trained on a slide rule. I mean, you don't know what that is, I'm sure, but but then I'm like, well, what about a calculator? And like, well, you can't use a calculator. Why not? I mean, anyway, it's going to obsolete the slide rule, which it did. That kind of thing. So yes, that's funny. How did you then apply your law degree, and how did you go from econ major, computer science minor with a law degree to starting your first company? Like, there might be some intermediate stories in there, but that seems like a really long putt. No, I can jump there fairly quickly because I went to law school and was very grateful. One of the top, we call it professors, a guy by the name of John Connolly. In fact, he litigated one of the early cases in this computer law world. And so for me, he was like an incredible mentor. And I was able to go learn under him and take special, some classes, independent studies with him. And so I went on through and, did well in law school. Once again, really worked hard. So, that thing of, it's, if you're competitive and you're going after, I don't think I'm all that smart, but I know I worked really hard and was very competitive at it. And law school is fairly competitive, but I was able to get a good job. But I had one of these moments, and that was like 2 months in, Ryan, as a lawyer now. And I'm like, in the library working on a brief. And I just had this moment of, I hate this. I'm dying. I don't want to do this.
You were only 2 months in?
I'm only 2 months in. So you can tell I'm not very patient, in terms of thinking, well, I know, eventually, I would work my way up in the firm and maybe be a partner and have other associates like me to do this kind of grunt work. But I was sitting there going, I don't know. I'm not. And the number of hours I'm working, it was, and then the amount of time it'd take to get there. There were a lot of, to get to that place in the firm. I just didn't know if I would have the patience or really enjoyed it. I love law school, honestly, the philosophy behind it and the way of thinking and what I learned, and especially as applied to computer science. But the practice of law and the billing of hours, I was like, I don't think I can get into that. So I went home and told my wife that and she was, of course, shocked, right? Because we were married my last year of law school, and she thought she was marrying somebody with a stable income, and that this would go away, given what I was talking about. And at the time, I had two older brothers. One I told you about, the computer genius, right? And the other one was a home builder, and they had been working on a software product for his home building business. Back in the days of this term called DOS, right? You wouldn't know what that is either, just operating system. I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? These are old terms. But they were working on a software product for his business. And then we decided, well, what if we tried to take this software product and, really take it to the market and sell it to home builders? And so was able to get a deal with my firm. They wanted me to get that entrepreneurship out of my system. They said, well, tell you what, we'll give you a 1-year sabbatical. Go get this out of your system. You'll be back, and we will see you within a year. So yeah, I went off and with two brothers, and fortunately at that point I didn't buy the big house because I just didn't know. I always knew in my gut, do I really want to be a lawyer? Do I really want to take out that kind of debt? I had one old car. I was married. My wife was then getting her master's, so we were still in married student housing at the University of North Carolina. So, we could live on so little, no kids. What a time to start our first, give it a shot.
And did that become Cherwell?
No, that became the product was called BuildSoft.
Well, yeah, great. You had BuildSoft before.
Yeah, so this was the first one. So Cherwell was, a couple companies later, and a move to Colorado, right? So we got some milestones. So yeah, this was from startup. We had no real funding, so it was bootstrapped. And again, my middle brother ran the home building business. I ran the software company, and my oldest brother did the programming. I would, go to trade shows and, bring a big old computer with a big old monitor and set them up in hotel rooms at conferences like the National Association of Home Builders shows, and, show people this software. And we started selling it. And within like 4 or 5 years, we were rated by Builder Magazine as the #1 software product for integrated construction management.
And that would be your first business that you built. By the way, how many businesses have you built so that we kind of know?
Well, I would say there are some schools and businesses and nonprofits, but I'd say software companies, 3. 2 of them which I helped start, one when I moved to Colorado, which we can talk about. But the important part of that story is when we were doing well, but then huge blow up with my brothers, okay, and in the family business. And that was the very first time that first time you remember the massive kick in the gut or the just incredible hardship when that occurred in our family. And, I'm not proud of it. We're very competitive and we're having disagreements, and both sides of this issue that we were having brings their attorneys in, and it was a mess.
Yeah, I think when we were together in Colorado Springs for one of the Rallyday events, I think you talked about how soul crushing it was to be in a legal disagreement, for a lack of a better word, with your own family members, and the outcome of that being a real humbling experience.
Yeah, just broken by it, just absolutely devastated and broken by it. And first time in my life, I remember that just absolutely brokenness. You can hardly breathe, kind of dark night of the soul. Because literally, I was asked to come to a board meeting, which we're a family business, right? A board meeting, and I'm a lawyer enough to know like that's unusual. And I walk in the room, and there's my 2 brothers, and there's my parents, and there's the 2 lawyers that I worked with that left their firm, but I brought them business. Right? So they're there, the 2 lawyers that I used to work with, and then the local pastor, because in the South, you got to make sure you bring in the local pastor. Anyway, that could be a story or a book, but and then literally they fired me. And so yeah, and so that was devastating and a big blow because we were doing well. It's just we were disagreeing on like, how to structure the business and could what we're doing in software, some of the money go to help the building business, et cetera. So without getting the details of what happened, it was a big blow up. We parted ways. We finally were able to settle. But it just destroyed the family so much and almost destroyed my marriage to the point where, my wife, Betsy, and I decided we got to reboot. We got to get out of here. We got to rebuild our broken world. And we were trying to decide where to go. And Betsy, who's a counselor, had somebody she respected out here, and she kind of wanted to go take some courses under the person here in Colorado. So we got in our cars and, moved to Colorado and again, the settlement was just a kind of a covenant not to compete. It gave me some months of pay, but at the end of the day, I came out here with like $2,000 in my bank account, but some runway in order to rebuild my life here.
Just for a second, because I've had one of the moments, a moment like the one you're describing. I've had probably two of them in my career, and your expression of feeling broken really hit me, and that is how I felt. I remember after there was no preacher in the room for my version of this, but similarly formal event and similar outcome. And I just remember like vividly my 1.5 mile drive to my home where my son was in the driveway waiting for me to get home and feeling humiliated and unworthy of even my 3.5-year-old. And just how terrible that felt when you left that meeting. Very fine pointed memory here I'm asking for, but I'm hopeful that you can go back there. Did you get in a car and drive home? And were you alone? And what were you thinking?
Well, it's the shame that comes with being escorted out of your family business, right, was a lot. And I will say this, because I don't want to come across as like I was just the victim, right? Because that's never the case where it's 100% one way or the other, right? I would say because and it just doesn't happen in one day. It's over the course of a year that things are just unraveling. And my brother and one of my brothers, my middle brother in particular, we were just having at it. And I would just say I was falling apart internally, right? And I would say even my moral life was falling apart internally, right? So honestly, when I walked in that meeting and I thought, there's a pastor here. What is he going to like challenge me on my moral life, right? Because like, why would you have a pastor in there? And so once I realized that, oh no, they don't have anything related to my moral life that's going on, then I had this righteous indignation that you don't know who you're messing with. Isn't that funny? You just flip like that of like, kind of you really want to mess with me in this, so I went from this humble, shame-filled, like, kind of I've been caught moment in my moral life to, oh my gosh, we're going to be at war here. You can't fire me. It's inappropriate. So it was both. It was the sense of absolute betrayal, a kick in the gut. And, over the course, you can imagine, when I sometimes joke about this, but it's no real joke, when you're fired by your own mama, that's a bad day. And remember, part of my story was, how I achieved and the recognition I get from the pride from my father and my parents was a big part of a motivator. So to be fired by the very people that you want to impress, to please, it was at the core of the ultimate failure. So moral failure, failing your parents, failing your family, but also at the same time feeling betrayed yourself. So it's all the emotions. It's all the emotions.
And did Betsy help you pick yourself up off the mat, or how did that go?
I mean, I think she was devastated too and scared. So it's not like we had all these resources to fall back on. We were doing well, and when I say we were rated number one by the building industry, that's a little bit of a we had about 60 employees, and we were doing well, but we had not had any kind of event or anything to where and we were paying ourselves, very little so we could invest back in the business. So we really didn't have a lot of money. So I would say it was very scary. And because all this going on and all the pressure from the year before, you know, hardened the marriage. So it was just, that's why I say it almost blew up there too, as part of it.
I get it.
But she was she agreed. That was that first moment, and that we were like, we need to reboot. And it was like, where you want to go? And she wanted to go to Colorado. I'd never been, other than through airports in Colorado. I'd never been here. I'd never seen Pikes Peak. So yeah, we were both on the same page of we need to reboot our lives, save our marriage first, and then worry about the rest of it.
And I'm picturing, did you drive from North Carolina to Colorado, or did you fly?
Yeah, so I got a buddy of mine, and we packed our 2 cars as much as we could, and a buddy of mine drove out and then flew my family out. And we started in Evergreen because I was like, it was near it was actually, I think, through Colorado Christian University. She wanted to take some of these courses, and that was outside of near Evergreen, so in Morrison. So yeah, that's where we decided to land. It was near ski slopes. I thought that would be cool or fun, and it was near Denver because I thought I'd probably end up in Denver.
In Colorado, no money, rebuilding marriage and sense of self. What was your first move to sort of, move forward?
So this was back in the day before, like, this would have been like in 94, 95. Okay. So we're not talking, you just then get on, the internet and pull up available jobs and things like that. So number one, we did some counseling. Okay. Started there. And then number two, I'd drive down to the Chamber of Commerce of Denver and just open up and look for, what are companies that are in Denver or Colorado Springs. And, this is the old fashioned way. You got to look it up and do the work. And then I started building lists and, worked on doing, honestly, a direct mail campaign of like, hey, I'm Vance Brown. I run a software company, to companies that seemed like a fit. And, honestly, I would then send like a FedEx package to some of these companies with an overview of my resume and how I think I could help their company. It was a little arrogant, but I didn't know how else you go about doing something like that. Again, this is pre-internet in terms of how you do it today. As it turned out, there was a company down in Colorado Springs that was doing really customer service, IT, help desk type of software. It was a company called Data, and they were one of the companies I sent the FedEx package to, and I actually got the interview. So that was, great providence, and very grateful for that. Came down here. As it turned out, it's a company called Data, and they had about, let's say, 40 employees, and they were looking for somebody to run customer service and somebody, and so I applied for any job I could find, honestly. And as part of it, I told them I could represent them legally, be their general counsel, because I always said, hey, if you're ever going to want to go and sell the company, you need to make sure it's all done right. So, that fear sells, right? Make sure you've done your due diligence well and protected your intellectual property. But literally, my first job there was to be the VP of customer service and general counsel. So I guess if we can't work it out with the customer, you then sue each other, wearing, both hats. But it was kind of bizarre and awkward, but that's what happened. And as part of that, the owner was looking to sell, and I was able to help with that process as an attorney. And within a year, the owner did sell, and I became the CEO of a wholly owned subsidiary of a public company. Was the way it turned out. And so I became CEO of that. And that was the start of then running a company like that and growing it.
All right. Take me from there to Truwell.
Okay. So from there, like, again, how like valuations work, but that first sale was like for, 40 million, but then we ended up growing. And then, by 2000, before the crash of 2000, we were able to get a valuation and sell part of the company at a unicorn rate, so over $1 billion valuation. And so you learn the game of valuations, right? A dollar is not a dollar, so we actually were able to acquire a company called Goldmine Software, which was contact management software, and that gave us a whole CRM story. So not just customer service, but pre-Salesforce kind of story. Back then, that was called contact management. It was Goldmine and a company called Act, and it was a great success story that we were able to get that kind of valuation and grow through some acquisitions to about 700 employees, and it was a good story. But what was happening during that is emotionally, I was a mess, Ryan. And this is all these, I know we focus on more the holistic and also the spirit side of how we're doing emotionally. But that, competitiveness that I had, I remember one time the chair of the board said, Vance, we're going to ride you like a mule until you drop. And honestly, I thought, you can't, that's impossible. I'm not going to drop. But I have to tell you, Ryan, I was emotionally spent. I was flying all over the world trying to get a deal done. And I was not sleeping, panic attacks, depression, anxiety, and literally not able, I just didn't think I could do it anymore. So in early 2000, after we'd done this deal and got that closed up where I thought the company was in good shape, unfortunately, I'd made enough money and had some decent bonuses that I had a little runway. I resigned in early 2000, right before the crash of 2000. Well, your timing was good, I suppose. And then honestly, Ryan, I spent 2 years just detoxing. I mean, able to detox, and that was a big, soul searching time in my life of what I believe and, why am I so fearful and anxious and, really needed the counseling and the help. But you didn't talk about that stuff. It's almost like this filled with shame that you need help emotionally. That's why, when we work with entrepreneurs now, I'm more curious about how they're doing on the inside and how they're dealing with all the emotions that go with trying to start a business and the stress of that and the family stress, et cetera. That generally, I think, takes more people out than the not getting the round of funding, let's say. A lot of that comes from my own crashes, and that was just a crash for me emotionally, an emotional crash. And so health and wellness and how important that is becomes a theme, right? But that was a learning moment that, no, I don't care how tough you are, you can crash. And I did.
And what did you learn there about the difference between like healthy fear or, reservations that we all have about whatever it is and anxiety? Like, where does fear become anxiety and then anxiety becomes, a mental and emotional crash? Like what is the difference between fear and anxiety in your opinion? Or how does...
So, I mean, they're related. Albert Einstein once said that the most important question you ever ask is the universe friendly? Okay. And so this is important in some of my journey to start wondering why I had this. And it's not just in me, but I saw it in my family, my father and my just cousins and others that are in my family of this, let's call it just this fear, just this cloud that just hovers. And, not to go too much into faith and spirituality, but, I said I grew up in North Carolina. It was, I grew up in this Bible Belt of fire and brimstone. And if I had to answer Einstein's question of like, do you believe the universe is friendly? The idea that if I messed up too much, and didn't say the right thing or believe the right thing, that I could burn and be tortured in hell forever. I got to tell you that when I really examined and had a lot of, let's say, counseling and, started down the path of, do I really believe the universe is friendly? My answer was, I don't. I believe the universe can be very punitive. And if I get out of line, and I had, and I shared some of those, let's call it failures and moral failures, et cetera, you get out of line, I'm like, the universe is going to kick my ass. And so really stepping back and going back to, let's say, these core underlying DNA beliefs, and I'd say these epigenetic beliefs that have come in through the family line. It's been many years to explore that, unpackage that, and let's say develop new narratives in my life to where today I believe the universe is friendly.
What a good awakening. And so 2 years in, you're fully detoxicated.
You're never fully detoxicated, but yes, So eventually I then went, and this was in 2004, I got together with two of my, let's say, I was not the owner I was the CEO of the Bendata Gold Mine story. And, back in 2004, now you're starting to see things like Salesforce, right? And you're starting to see that the internet's becoming a thing, and, browser-based applications, or the fact that you no longer had to sync data. You could actually use the internet. And so we thought, well, what if we built another, let's say, help desk? Now it's called service management application, but using the latest technology. You had now smartphones that are coming on board. All this technology had changed so much, but go after the same market but with modern technology. So I got together with two of the people I'd worked with, one technology guy and one more the operation guy at Front Range Bendata, and we decided to start a company. It was called Sharewell, and it was a company that went after the same basic market, but with later technology.
I've been mispronouncing it. Sharewell. What is Sharewell? What was the story behind the name?
Great question, because I love telling it. Well, I wanted to be a company because we bootstrapped it. And one of the reasons I believe in bootstrapping, if you can, because you can't always, right, is I want to be able to sustain the test of time, and I want to be able to build a company with culture that we valued and have the same values that, and to keep that. And sometimes you bring in, you get too much investment too early, you lose control, you can lose the culture, that whole thing. And so we wanted to sustain the test of time. And, my two partners, we couldn't agree on anything. We were great partners and we'd worked together and we knew we could be. But in terms of, like, what could we name it that we could all agree to? That was a problem. But one thing we had in common was we all agreed that we loved the Lord of the Rings. So the whole Tolkien story, and really, C.S. Lewis. And in fact, one of my partners was from England and, also like C.S. Lewis, even though we kind of disagreed on theology and things like that. But but one of the partners that, again, lived in the UK for a while said, in Oxford, there's actually a river that's a tributary for the Thames that goes through Oxford called the River Sharewell. Some pronounce Charwell, etc. But and it's on that river, that C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien would brainstorm these great stories that have survived the test of time. And I went, oh my gosh, that's it. And we were actually told by people like Gartner and others, you can't call it Sharewell because nobody knows how to pronounce it. People pronounce it differently. And you need something that's, easier to pronounce and people can. And I was like, I don't care. That story to me will define our culture. We want to build a culture that has certain values and is built so that we can. If we love this job, we don't have to sell it. We can just do this for a living as long as we want, and bring in people that have a similar, common values and shared values. So that was the reason for the name Sharewell.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Glad I asked. Okay, so tell us the story. I mean, spoiler alert, this business grew like a weed and was incredibly successful, and probably, at least here in Colorado, sort of the monument to your entrepreneurship in many ways, or the masterpiece of your professional career, at least, the way I tell a story.
Yes.
How many years did it take, and sort of what was the outcome? And let's get to the little bit to the end of the story, because it's a big one.
Yeah. So we focused. It's called service management, and we unlike there was another company. The competitors at the time in 2004 were companies like CA and IBM and BMC, big companies. But we thought, no, we're going to be missile-locked. They're distracted, and most of those companies, they buy other technologies and they really aren't passionate and understand it themselves. And so at the time, just so we thought we can get them small and agile and missile-locked, and we built a product that was better than these called legacy systems, because that was what dominated. There's the big legacy older systems. And but at the same time that was going on was another company called ServiceNow that was doing it too. But we came from us as founders came from doing it from the mid-market. It was Bendata and a product called Heat. and they came from the enterprise from a company called Remedy and created ServiceNow. But I didn't know about it in 2004. And so I didn't think at the end of the day, they were going to be our big competitor. But yes, you're right. There's plenty of market share for two startups at the time. Again, we're focused more mid-market, they more enterprise. And yeah, we experienced this, exponential kind of growth, even after bootstrapping, it was exponential growth. So, one year, I want to say, we're on the Deloitte, the Fast 500, almost, several years in a row in terms of how fast we're growing. I'm sure like at the time, Colorado's company, technology company of the year, starting to receive accolades. So we started in '04 to build a platform. We had our first beta in '07. And, by 2012, and again, we were able to bootstrap. By 2012, though, we're getting all kinds of people calling us. People always say, hey, is there funding out there? And I'm like, well, you build a good company, and I promise you, you don't even have to find funding. They'll find you, right? And so we started getting a lot of calls and, ultimately met with Insight Venture Partners in 2012. I wasn't going to do a deal with them because we didn't need the money, but then they came in and, there is a point where you go, wow, okay, well, that could really help us if we maybe took some of that money because we could do more. And so in 2012, we did take an investment from them. Although I'll tell you this, you have a lot of leverage when you don't need it, right? And so I think we got a valuation and a deal that was above what it was probably worth, but that made it happen. By the way, they did well too at the end of the day. It wasn't that they're not stupid. And then a little bit later, we got investment from KKR, one of the largest private equity companies in the world. And so once again, they came to us and, we were able to fund the business more. So, but I will say this so yes, I would say I love the part of the company that's very entrepreneurial, the vision, the strategy, the early team, the small culture that we built, the first 100 employees and maybe in the first 200 where you kind of know everybody's name. But I will tell you that for me, and this is what happened in Data Goldmine, that I now had a reference point. There came a point in a business that it gets too large where I don't like it anymore. It doesn't feel entrepreneur. It's more about operational excellence and scaling, et cetera, versus vision, strategy, and how do you even get on the map, right? And so I was starting to feel that burnout again. And so in 2016, 17, I left and it was ultimately sold in 2021. So we were, KKR backed in the acquisition of our company. And, I won't say the exact numbers, but yeah, we did extremely well. I'm very grateful. But I'll say this, not near as well. It's all relative, right? If you look at ServiceNow, over $100 billion market cap company. But again, very grateful for the team. But, I would have said, yeah, I would have loved to have been a ServiceNow and to have their kind of success, let's say.
Did you make a explicit decision or a definitive mark in your life that you said, I've done the business thing, I've built 3 great companies by this point? Did you decide to be a civic leader at that point, or did that just sort of materialize because you were active in it anyway, but you had time then to pursue it more aggressively? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, from 2004, all my career where I'm trying to build and run a software company, honestly, I was head down, butt up. I was very focused on the business. I was not really plugged into what's going on in my own city. I was not even really networked in. I think it took a while. We were on the north side of Colorado Springs. I think it took even a while for the chamber to even find us. And oh my gosh, we got this. So, one of our companies just won Colorado's Company of the Year and the Entrepreneur of the Year, those EY type things. And, all of a sudden, we're in the news, right? But no, I was not plugged in and didn't know the city leaders. And it was really more in 17 when I was going to step back and just be chair of the board and not run the company in terms of the day-to-day, that I started looking in and pulling my head out of the sand, not the sand, but focus, and to see how I can help, my own community. I had been involved in the community but more related to my kids, like early in like the late 90s, early 2000s, I helped start a charter school called the Classical Academy. And but that was less about the city, it was more about doing something for my kids, right? But I think we're still the largest charter school in Colorado. And, you know, 30 something hundred kids, 3 different campuses. And so I was involved at that level because I have a passion for education. But in terms of just more for the city and my community beyond the charter school, yeah, I was not very involved. And that happened in 17. I started asking around of like, what's going on? How can I help? And, we have a lot of developer community here. And, they'd tried to have more. I'm like, why aren't there more share wells in Colorado Springs? I don't understand. And they say, well, it's very difficult. We're big in military here and DOD. You can do DOD here, but you really can't do very good as far as commercial software here. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, have you not seen what we were able to do? And, so I challenged that and I said, well, do we have a incubator accelerator for high tech companies? And I said, most cities I travel to that have a great, let's call it ecosystem for high tech companies, they have, people that help them, mentors, and the city comes behind and has an incubator accelerator like a Techstars or Y Combinator to help. There was not anything like that here. I think they had tried, but I said, well, that's what we need to do. Let's start one of those, and we did, and it's called Exponential Impact.
Exponential Impact. Yeah, and funny. I mean, that's your other big, again, monumental legacy asset that you built that's very well known here in Colorado. And Colorado Springs have some funny self-effacing humor. It's kind of been the city that isn't as cool as Boulder and not nearly as vibrant as Denver. And it's always been this like third city in Denver that had a reputation for being fairly conservative and not very exciting. And I saw a funny T-shirt that said, Colorado Springs is not as boring anymore. Or, like there's always these little jokes. Do you think that the accelerator that you built, do you think that had a part in elevating Colorado Springs as a true center for entrepreneurship?
I think so. And I think we had to help change that narrative of what you're talking about, stereotype. Because my story was, we're that, big, small city or whatever that thing is. And I was like, this city embraced me. Like, for instance, getting your first customer in a particular vertical, it's hard because people say, where are your references? You're like, well, we don't have a reference, right? Well, if you don't have people that will help you and companies that help you. So I'll give you an example. We were getting into the service management solution for education. UCCS here, Pam Shoffley's Back, I remember, we went there and said, we're a local company, but we have, we're doing well, in terms of, but we don't have a university. And would you give us a chance? And, we'll teach your students how to build applications on our platform. And we developed a partnership. So they were our first customer that believed in us in the, higher education space. And Pam Zalback was even willing to do a video for us on how kids were building applications that did the admissions process using Sharewell, right? And how incredible this was. Got that on video and ultimately became the #1 software for service management and I think the world for higher education. But we have another story in the vertical of financial, banks, or how do you get into the financial world? Well, Imp Federal Credit Union here was willing to give us a shot, became our first customer. So I would tell people, here everybody knows somebody that knows someone that can get you in a door. And so I can't imagine a better place to get your first customers than be in a city that wants you to be successful and willing to come behind you and be your first customer.
We probably are at the time of the story where our mutual friend, now senator, but at the time Governor Hickenlooper, twisted your arm like he did mine to be the CEO of the National Cybersecurity Center. What was that chapter like? And when did that start? And where did that overlap with your work at Exponential Impact? I don't know this part of the story.
Yeah, so Senator Hickenlooper came down. And I was very grateful because he, we were Colorado Software Company of the Year and things like that. And so he wanted to come down and check out Sharewell, and he did. And I was governor at the time, obviously, right? And I was very like, that I respected that he would come. Because I still viewed us as a very little play. I mean, yeah, in Colorado Springs were something, and I guess in Colorado, but very honored that he would come down. And remember at the time, as a 17, I was thinking about 16, 17, stepping back. And I'd heard about this concept of they were looking in the National Cybersecurity Center, UCCS. Governor at the time, Hickenlooper, had gone to Israel and had seen an ecosystem of industry, government, and education working together in Israel and cybersecurity. And he said, well, we work with each other well in Colorado. We should be able to do that in Colorado. So he came down here once again, worked with, the UCCS people, and Shockley Zalabak and Martin Wood and other people. And they came up, well, gosh, let's create, get industry, education, and government working together and do it in a building that UCCS owns, and we'll call it the National Cybersecurity Center. So at some point, though, they wanted an entrepreneurial CEO, that's in 17, to really help get it funded and off the ground, et cetera. I wouldn't say I was a cyber expert, but it's in my wheelhouse of, problem incident management and IT and all that world. So, I knew some of it and the importance of security. And so, yes, they asked me if I would then run the National Cybersecurity Center, which was incredible because, I was saying, but can we do at the same time build an incubator accelerator that's focused on emerging technologies because they go hand in hand. So that'd be part of the ecosystem, right? And so they were all good with that. So in the same building as the National Cybersecurity Center, you have this incubator accelerator focused on emerging technologies. And at the NCC, we were also asked to help establish the Space ISAC, which is a White House initiative. That's an Information Sharing Analysis Center. So that goes in the building. So you've got the Space ISAC, and then, UCCS and all of their education, their undergrad, master's, and doctorate programs in aerospace and cybersecurity are in the building. So can you imagine the ecosystem of all this working together? And now I'm excited. The latest thing is we're now building a high school that's a STEM-based high school in that same building that is focused on engineering, aerospace, really STEM-based, and cybersecurity. So that's an ecosystem and a whole workforce development play that's like none other I know of in the country. So I give the credit to Governor Hickenlooper for having a vision of an ecosystem working together. And I believe in Colorado Springs, we have the prototype of the best ecosystem for a vertical that, I know of. And so, I don't know anything quite like it. Now with the high school coming in, I think it can be a model for the future.
Well, it's a good thing you decided to retire in 17.
Well, you can tell I like the small startup stuff. I didn't get life out of once it got a certain size and I didn't know people's names.
I think a lot of our listeners who are founders totally get that and appreciate it very much. I think where your story is so different and why I put you on the pedestal that I do is the significant work you did in building that ecosystem in Colorado Springs. And that is why that's the real reason that I refer to you as the Pike Peak in my life. And when I think about Colorado Springs, it is also a good place in our podcast to bring this home. And by home, I mean to where we started this conversation around success and significance. And you might say that you chased success until 17 and then turned your eye towards significance and you've achieved that. Tell me about those two words and which one has been more fulfilling and where do you take personal pride and maybe even where spirituality fits into these two different kind of ways of looking at our wake, if I could call it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ryan, for that, because this is the area I'm probably most passionate about. I think is a Christian mystic, Thomas Merton, that once said, you put your ladder up against the wall and you climb up all that ladder. You get to the top of the ladder and you realize this isn't the wall I thought I was climbing up. It's not satisfying, honestly. And, that thing of, but you don't know it until you get there, the money or even the accolades. it's good for the ego, but that's just not satisfying at our soul level. And in fact, the ego, gets way too much of your life when you're trying to, build and grow that. And so I think some of it comes with age, and I think some of it comes from those shattered dreams, those, you know, I've heard them called life quakes in our life that we all have. We all have had them. I've had cancer now, and as you live longer, you have these things in life that I think humble us in a beautiful way, and that we realize that what matters, what is important. And I'm not saying that growing those companies, really, I was built for that. I loved growing companies with culture and doing things as a team, and I just love the idea of something that comes from nothing. 0 to 1 is infinite. That's why I like this infinity symbol, and that's in our Exponential Impact logo. 0 to 1 is something from nothing is a miracle to me. And I love that miracle, and watching them and being part of it and knowing I couldn't do it alone and building teams around it. But the more that I'm chasing after the success, it's shallow and it's not deeply meaningful. The people were when I look back at the memories, it's not the awards that matter, even though that's probably gets me on podcasts, but it's the people that I met and, getting through the difficult times, with your family, and we all have it. It's really those dark nights of the soul that mold us and shape us in terms of what matters.
And after 17, did you have this feeling or sense that there was something beyond that ladder against the wall? Or did you find it and then realize, wow, that's a big difference? Like, what came first?
I think what comes is I'm a big fan of a book called Falling Upward. And I believe, when things are working and, you're chasing after the success, and I guess for a while, and let's call it seasons of life, that kind of works. It's very healthy for a young man, young woman to get educated and go after it. Go after the American dream. There's nothing wrong with that, and provide for your family, et cetera. But if you're trying to do that later in life, that you're still doing the same things and that same script of going after that American dream and what I need more and more. And I think in America, the idea was all about more and more accumulation. And we build these towers and we realize it's it's not meaningful. And it really doesn't matter. So that book Falling Upward I don't think we get out, we change without, let's call it, these shattered times in our life that we feel these big gut punches or these dark nights of the soul, or these times that we all experience of something happened to our children, or cancer, or medical problems, or losing jobs, or the list goes on. I heard the term life quakes that rock us to our soul. And so by falling, we realize that we really do these soul searching. And I believe in my, let's call it, spiritual faith, that it's in these dark times that there's always resurrection and that beauty from ashes that comes up. But I don't think we grow personally and into better, more loving people if things just work. I think it's these important times when we fall and have these life quakes that something better arises in us that matters more.
I love that. And the only reason I'm pausing is I'm thinking about the half dozen or so of them that I've met in my life very selfishly right now, just reflecting. When you think about spirituality and business, I mean, do they, in your mind, where you've been with your life, both professionally and with your civic life, where do they fit together, in your opinion, Vance?
Well, I mean, we teach at the accelerator incubator, whether they know it or not, we're infusing a lot of spirituality in it. Because I think when I have a nervous, let's call it a breakdown or mental health problems, I believe it's something going on in my spirit, like this mind, body, spirit. So we talk in terms of mind, body, spirit, and I'm not the first to say that, we've all been programmed and we need to rewire our brains. And we talk about what it takes to rewire the programmings of, let's say, bad narratives, like, the universe is punitive. That's a bad narrative. We need, that rewiring. And then to me, the body, the Body Keeps Score, that famous book, that how do we regulate our bodies when we start feeling something's not right? And our body keeps track of the trauma that we've experienced, ends up in our body. And then spirit to me is a lot about connection with each other, connection with our own spirit and soul and our more true selves, and connection with the world and nature and all of it, right? And there's a connectedness that we grow into. And so, even that question that I said that I opened up with is the universe friendly? I'm not saying is God good, that you could say that's the same thing if you believe in a God, but do you really use the same kind of verbiage to know that we all, Einstein said that. Here's a guy who's known for E equal MC square, scientist, and he came up with that's the most important question, the what's going on inside and what do you believe and what narratives are you telling yourself? Because I really believe our ability to succeed in life and to be impactful, not be just successful, but significant, impactful. I call it loving, the ability to connect with the world and with others, and to love better and to care more and to be more empathetic and more compassionate with ourselves and with others is in all of it. It's holistic. I don't think you pull one out of the other. So it's not one or the other. It's and. It's not dualistic. It's non-dual. It's and not or.
That's so great that you teach that at the accelerator program, because I do think entrepreneurship has a romantic charm to its exterior, but a very dark and lonely interior of being an entrepreneur. And
well, the studies show that entrepreneurs struggle more with depression and suicidal thoughts, higher levels of suicide, all that. Well, and think about it. It's lonely. What am I going to do when I feel shame with I'm failing my family because I'm not bringing in the check, or I'm not able to provide as much for my kids, and this is going to work, and investors have invested in me and I'm going to fail them. And it's all of it. And so it's a lot. It is a lot.
Well, I'd like to end with a new beginning that I understand you all have decided to start. And for those of you listening, I just heard this news when I got on the Zoom with Vance, that you are moving from Colorado Springs back to North Carolina. And I said, Vance, don't take this the wrong way, but why would you do that? You've built such an incredible tower, as you call it, here in the state. And I don't know, the minute you said that, or the second you said that, I had this feeling of almost homesickness, that I was losing this magnificent human being from Colorado. I don't know, it just really hit me. What's going on there, Vance? And what went into your decision, and what are you after as you now go back to where you started?
We know that thing we sometimes just have to trust as we get connected with our own hearts, our own souls, our own spirit of what we're feel led to do, right? And we came to Colorado, if you remember, I said my wife and I were both absolutely in sync that, we're supposed to come to Colorado without knowing why. And, the great theologian Steve Jobs says you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking back. And when I look back over the course of 30 years in Colorado, it has been, yes, there's been incredible, I call them mini deaths, those life quakes. But oh my gosh, how God or the universe has used us with others to impact is, I'm so grateful. I've built incredible relationships and all of it, and just couldn't be happier. So it's certainly, I would say, coming out of North Carolina 30 years ago was running. I'm not running from Colorado. We love Colorado in so many respects and have incredible relationships. It feels like there's that inner call and you called it a homesickness of I kind of want to go home. And I don't even know why exactly and what's there for us. But you sometimes have to trust that still small voice that, especially when it's, again, the way we've always rolled, when my wife and I agree that, yeah, that's it. We got to trust that. And without knowing what dots are in front of us and how they'll connect, and was it a mistake? And we tell entrepreneurs all the time. I tell entrepreneurs, you learn by failing. There's no failure in this. You just pivot. Hey, that's how you grow, and that's how you learn. Is that wasn't right. I'll pivot. And we could always go there and go, that was a miss. We pivot. Maybe we'll come back or go somewhere else. But there's just something within us all. Like being an entrepreneur, why do you do it? You just feel like you're supposed to, right? And you got to go with that. And sometimes it's those failures that you pivot that lead to that next thing that is really the reason why. So I can't answer your question totally, Ryan, other than this is how we roll. And I feel like it's a call. I love Colorado. I look forward to going home. And, 10 years from now, we can get on here again and I can tell you why.
I will look forward to that. And on behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for quintessential Vance being as vulnerable as you are and as strong as you have been in your life. And just want to again thank you for being such a powerfully positive role model for me as I think about the way I want to lead my life in service to others and to being significant and having an impact. You have an incredible wake. And, to go back to the Pikes Peak conversation where we started, you may be leaving Colorado Springs, but you're still up on top of that mountain and a beacon for all of us to follow. So thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you, Ryan.
Will take you up on the podcast in 10 years, and maybe I'll give you a shout or a text or two in the meantime and just check in on you to see how those crumbs are falling.
That'd be fun. Sure. So thank you. Thank you for your friendship. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Vance.